everyone, and welcome to my channel. Thank you for tuning in today. I actually get to have a special treat and have my interviewee in person today. Yay! The very first time. Yay! So this is my friend Bethany, and we're really excited to have her. It's going to be wonderful.
Thank you, Laura.
So thank you for coming.
Yeah, I'm super excited.
Awesome.
Awesome to be here, and we're getting a nice day.
Yes.
Which is really awesome.
Yes, we're sitting in the backyard. Our very professional studio.
Yeah, kids are down for a nap. Moms, they got to sneak out when they can. You know.
That's right. Oh man. All right. So we'll kind of get rolling. So first, I understand that Bethany's parents converted from Protestantism, then became acquainted with traditionalism, and ended up in the SSPX after a brief time in the FSSP. So I'll just ask if you even have any memories before you were in the society.
I don't have a lot of memories before, very few. I was just turned 5 when my parents started attending the SSPX chapel here. So I have a few memories here and there. They're kind of fuzzy, but I think it was more just like the general, just kind of, I don't know, I do definitely feel like things were a little bit more peaceful. Like it was super fun, but being 4 is just really fun. 3 and 4, you're just, everything is new and exciting and great. So yeah, I would say I don't have a lot of vivid memories, especially when it comes to religion before.
Okay. So what was it like being a child raised in the society?
Oh man. Very rigid. You don't really know anything different. That's your normal. And children are very adaptable. They'll adapt to about anything. But I would remember it was very like children should be seen and not heard. We went to mass like every opportunity. You definitely had to go to mass every opportunity. So Saturday nights and Sunday mornings. And like all the kids, we had to be like kneeling, facing the altar, and if we would like try to sneak a look at each other, they would, that kid would get like a smack or a flick or something. So we were like, we gotta like keep it together. And I constantly like trying to, keep my veil on my head and walk around like this. But yeah, I would say it was definitely more rigid for sure.
Okay.
But
all right.
Yeah.
So like what did you like about it? You're growing up being a kid in the society, and what did you not like?
What did I like about it? We had a really fantastic MC. And he took a lot of pride in the liturgy and working with all the altar boys, and it was really beautiful. I enjoyed that. I played organ from the age of like 12 to 16, and I really enjoyed that a lot. So those were probably definitely the highlights for me. What I didn't like about it, that's kind of a really really long list. But yeah, I think we'll get into that probably with some of the questions.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. What was it like being the oldest daughter of 10 children?
It was awesome. It was awesome, and it was also really, really hard because going along with being in the SSPX, like there's a lot of type of things that go along with that, and especially being here in Montana. We moved out here to homestead, and so we were homesteading. It was like back to the land, and I think I loved having a big family. I love all of my siblings so much. They're awesome. I couldn't imagine it like any other way. So I'm so grateful. But I think being the oldest daughter, there was a lot of pressure to just like be a second mom. I had a lot of responsibilities really young, taking care of the little kids by the time I was like 8 or 9. And I was cooking a ton, by the age of 12. And there was a lot of responsibility.
Man.
Maybe even a little too young. I grew up really fast.
I was just reading in this book by Conrad Bars. He's a Catholic psychologist, called Feeling and Healing Your Emotions. It's really interesting, but he talked about treating a lot of people for depression later in life because as like older children in a family, they were entrusted with too much responsibility too young, and it kind of like it set them back. Like they never really got to have their full childhood, and so then they're kind of struggling with these other issues later on, or even like issues where, you know, I've talked to friends where it's like they don't get excited about thinking about getting married and having kids because they're just like, man, I already raised all my siblings and I'm kind of like, I'm kind of worn out. And it is different having your own kids, but they don't know that because they haven't experienced it yet.
Yep. I almost felt like burned out before I even got started. I have 2 kids. One's 2 and one's almost 10 months old. And they're awesome. I love them. But yeah, you definitely, when you feel like you've already raised a family, it's,
it's rough. So you guys were in a mission chapel, like you were rural and it wasn't like the main church, which is why there wasn't like mass more often. So because you only had mass like what, twice a month?
We had mass twice a month, and then on the off Sundays we would meet for a rosary and we'd have like a potluck after. So yeah, when the priest was here, like I said, it was like you went to mass every opportunity that you had. So they'd get in Saturday night, you go to mass Saturday night and confession, and then Sunday morning you would have mass as well. So yeah, didn't have weekly sacraments until Father Sean started mass, and then they got weekly sacraments really quickly.
It was really interesting.
We begged for weekly sacraments for a long time, but never happened.
So then the local diocesan church was given permission to have the priest celebrate the TLM every single Sunday, and immediately the SSPX chapel local to us started having sacraments every weekend.
Boom, and stated it even though
so that was a very interesting coincidence. Possible coincidence.
Possible coincidence. You could call it that. For
sure. So how do you think the traditionalist mindset affected your growing up and what was expected of you?
I think it really affected everything. I was expected. It felt like I was expected to just live a very reverent, perfect, Catholic life full of lots of suffering and, carrying my cross well. You'll have to ask me the question again.
Well, I'm thinking about like, you being a girl in a big family and you're the oldest. So that, responsibility. And then like gender roles, traditional gender roles. I mean, not like I have anything against traditional gender roles, but do you feel like that was really exaggerated or like oppressive, or did it kind of, was there not really a lot of pressure and it was just kind of like, well, we all pitch in, we all just kind of help? Or was it very distinct between the boys and the girls and things like that too?
Definitely very distinct. Definitely. Absolutely very distinct. There was more in my family in particular, and I can't speak for the other families, but in my family in particular, it was very important that the boys were educated, and that their education, we were all homeschooled, was kept up on because they could go to seminary and become priests, and because, they were the men. And it was like, no, as long as the girls know how to cook and clean and take care of children, then they're good. They're either that or they're going to the convent. They're either going to be moms and have as many babies as they can, or they're going to go to the convent, So that was our only 2 options, and we really didn't need much of an education for that. So I had like big gaps in my education, because we were very influenced by, are we saying names of bishops and stuff?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Bishop Williamson, if you guys are familiar, he was still part of the SSPX at the time. My parents were very influenced by him, and he felt very strongly that women didn't have a place in sports. They didn't have a place in any kind of careers outside of the home, that their place was in the home, and their place was, like I said, to either join a nunnery or, be a great little housewife,
Did you ever feel like submissive. Being a nun? Did you ever think about that?
I was terrified that I was going to have to be a nun, because being a nun was it was the highest calling for a woman. Obviously, the highest calling was being a priest. They would say this prayer at the end of every single service that they had. You know, Lord, grant that my son becomes a priest. I promise to live as a good Christian woman. Like, they would all beg together, like in front of the Blessed Sacrament, please, God, give me a priest. It's the highest honor. And I remember sitting in there being like, they never pray for their daughters. They never pray that, you know, they meet good husbands or that, you know, or anything like that. There was no prayer for the daughters. It was only the men, like, please, like, so I could never bestow an honor, like, you know, my brothers, they had that role. And actually my parents, because of the society's mentality, they really focused on, you know, the sons that had potential to become a priest. And I never could give that to them. My little sister actually, like, she wanted to be a boy really bad because she wanted to be a priest, you know, and because that was honestly the highest honor that, you know, the holiest life, you know, if you want to become a saint, you really got to be religious. And I felt really guilty because I didn't want to be a nun. I never felt called to it, but I just felt like they would share a lot of stories of the more you try to run away, like the more chance that you're probably supposed to be religious. And so I would literally freak out because I'm just like, God's going to make me be a nun because it will be very penitential for me and it'll be great suffering and I will be a great saint.
Oh my God.
No, I know. So I had a lot of like, I had a lot of fear because I was like, oh, you know, like I felt like I wasn't, if I got married, that I was going to be giving less to God and I was being selfish and I wasn't fully just willing to sacrifice everything and cut all the strings and just be fully devoted 100%.
You'd always be carnal.
I would. Yes, I would. You know, but at least if I had a lot of babies, maybe I'd make up. Or maybe if I produced a priest, like that was the highest thing I could do. If I could produce a priest, maybe I could make up for the fact that I didn't become religious. But yeah.
Wow, that is really interesting. Yeah, that's okay. So speaking as a woman, you know, a girl and a woman, like, how were you treated in your time in the society and how did you observe other women being treated, like your mom? Or, you know? Oh
gosh, watching my mom is spunky, independent, and super intelligent. Super intelligent. And I always really admired that about my mom. And I have some memories. Like I said, I was only 5, but because they just joined the SSPX when I was 5, I have lots of memories of her just you know, just kind of being a light, and she would talk to everybody. She's a super people person, and she'd have all these great conversations with the guys. And I remember there being some tension because basically the women talked with the women and the men talked with the men, and there wasn't a lot of mixing. And so it was very quickly that my mom had to be like put in her place, like, no, you need to be like talking with the women, and there can't be this like, we're not equals, you know, like men and women, they have very specific roles, and you know, men are the head and women are supposed to be submissive, and we should be worrying about, you know, homeschooling, child rearing, all of those things. And my mom, like, over time, her spirit just tanked, and you know, she became so negative. She had to suppress who she was. And I think, and again, there's no blame. I'm not trying to blame my parents, but because of the environment that we were in, like, they had to do that for us girls as well. And so you know, what I learned to do was just to instantly become a doormat, to instantly be like, oh, I'm so sorry. And just, you know, try to be humble and quiet and small, and don't draw any attention to myself, especially, you know, anything like that. And of course, we had to dress a certain way. We had a dress code, and we also had to veil. And you could not go into the church without a veil. You couldn't do it. And I remember I would sometimes, if you forgot your chapel veil, they had these veils. We called them the veils of shame because they were these like scarves that were like rags, pretty much. I don't even know where they found them, but they were hanging on this rail at the end. And if you came in and you forgot it, you had to wear one of these basically like rags on your head.
Oh no.
And because you had to be covering your head. And I remember sometimes like I'd forget my veil and I would have to like pee so bad, and I just need to run into the church to pee, and I'd be like, do you think I can like do this like so that I can walk in? Because I literally felt like I could not have my head uncovered in front of the Blessed Sacrament as a woman. And I would watch, you know, a guy walk in and be like, wow, like what is it about being born a man that you're just free to, you don't have to cover yourself to be in front of the Blessed Sacrament. God just accepts you. He just accepts your hair, your head. You don't need to cover. You can just walk in and go to the bathroom. You know what I mean?
Oh
for me though, I'm like trying to find my veil because I'm like, I literally felt like I would be almost struck dead if I walked into the church without my head covered. I mean, it just came to that point that it was like, you know, I can't. So, you know, we had that. And then, obviously I had the same thing, like couldn't really, you know, talk on the same level with the guys, and very, very strong gender roles.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So did you feel like, well, the veil thing is interesting to me. Like, was that ever carefully explained to you, like why that was a thing or why they considered it mandatory when it wasn't even enforced under canon law after 1983 anymore? I mean, it was abrogated, so there's no obligation for it anymore. But they made you feel like you were obligated.
I never knew there was no obligation.
Oh my heavens.
See, yeah, I did not know. It was told to me that, yes, in some Novus Ordo liberal Catholic parishes, the women aren't veiling anymore, and because they're liberal, feminists, and they want, you know, to show off and show themselves. And, you know, one of the ways that they would try to explain it is like it was always going back to your body. Like, you need to veil it, you need to hide it, you're a woman and men are going to use your body. And there was a lot of objectification of women, so much objectification. And it's like they would say on the world is objectifying women, like them, you know, in bikinis and all this stuff. No, they were literally doing the same thing. They were objectifying women's bodies, but it's just like, oh, it's because, you know, you're going to cause someone to fall and you're going to cause someone to stumble. And so I was just told that like the boys and the men, they need to be focused in on serving God. They're up there serving on the altar, because in our parish it was really small. All of the boys served, all the girls sang in the choir mostly. And so they'd be like, you need to not be a distraction. And you are, and I always was like, I guess it's not distracting at all. The million times my veil's like slipping down and I'm like trying to keep it up. That's not distracting, but for sure having my hair out was definitely like, the boys were just going to be staring at it the whole time. You know what I mean? Like, it's ridiculous. It makes you think about your hair. It makes you feel so responsible for what everybody else is doing and thinking. They didn't want us to wear perfume, because if a guy smelled you as you walked by, that would distract him from, you know, the Blessed Sacrament. If he saw your hair, if he saw your shape, like, you needed to just try to be this like little blob that they didn't notice at all, which is so ridiculous because we're human at the end of the day and we're going to notice each other. Like,
oh yeah, that's
unavoidable. That is unavoidable. Like, men are men and women are women. And so it just so much scrupulosity, so much fear. I can just say, like, I probably about the age 6 or 7, that's when I started living in fear. And it was just constant, you know, so terrified to walk out the door because every little thing I did, I was worried, you know, it was going to be a distraction.
And so then, like, the nicer body you had, like, the nicer shape you had, then the more, like, they were down on you for, you know, like, you have to be more careful. And, like, almost like it was worse to be more beautiful or to be thin or whatever than because the, you know, if you weren't really anything to look at, people pretty much left you alone.
Yeah. And this is honestly really sad. I didn't like this for a lot of reasons because I think that it really did play into this like worldly idea of like, you know, the magazine cover girl. But this would happen to me sometimes, that I would wear some of the same outfits that some of the girls who maybe struggled with weight or were different body types, and they were fine, but I wasn't fine. And I'd be pulled aside and been like, well, you can't wear that. And I'd be like, well, that's what, you know, my peers are wearing. Or friends are like, well, no, you look too good in it. And so I was just like,
wow, it's like shaming you for looking good. So you're like, oh man. So that do you even want to be a woman? Like, what is there to make you?
I mean, I was happy to be a woman. Obviously, you know, like I knew God had not made a mistake in making me as a woman, but I hated, especially as I started developing into a woman, I had more stress on me because I was like, oh my gosh, what if they can see, you know, that I have curves? What if they can, you know, see my womanly shape? And, you know, I try to wear things like as boxy and boyish, honestly. There was at our chapel in particular, a lot of the girls, there was this kind of tomboyish vibe where it was like camo jackets and like no like feminine, you know, don't show that feminine curve because yeah.
Whoa. Really so then this is reinforced regularly, right? Like they bring this up a lot to you, but then it's like it's out of balance because it's all on the women basically, right? I mean, did they spend time talking to the guys about, you know, how to appreciate a woman without sinning over her, or how to, you know, practice custody of the eyes or things like that? Or is it pretty much just woman, this is your job, this is your problem, you're the problem?
It was our job. It was definitely 100% our job. So about once a month, the priest would get maybe... It would depend, especially during the summertime. During the summertime, when people started to push it, we would get it even more often. But the priest, he would get up, and during the homily, which makes me so upset looking back on this, because that's a time, you know, that you're supposed to be talking about the gospel. And it would be literally during the homily, he would give a reminder, like, girls, make sure your skirts are 6 inches below the knee when you stand up, 4 inches below the knee when you sit down. Make sure it's 2 fingers below the collar, you know, collarbone, no longer. And they'd always say, make sure it's 2 fingers this way. It's not 2 fingers this way. You know, like they literally do that, you know, and I'd be sitting there like, yeah, you know, it's better if you have elbow sleeves, but, you know, short sleeves are permitted during the summertime. And so I'd always be like, and if you wore one that was like barely, you'd be like trying to like adjust it the whole time, you know, because you'd be like, oh, I don't want to get, you know, I don't want to get caught, you know. So yeah, it was definitely like, you do not want to be a stumbling block for your brother, which was totally unavoidable since just being a woman was a stumbling block.
Oh wow.
But they were especially very, very hard on the women. We didn't have any like theology of the body. No, to me the mindset was very much body is bad, we need to rise above it, we need to overcome it, overcome our sinful, sinful bodies.
Wow.
It's very Protestant, actually. Very puritanical. Very puritanical.
Well, and even these modesty guidelines that they're getting this from, it's from some like letter of a cardinal in 1930. You used to be able to find it around on the internet. You can't even find the letter in its entirety anymore, like anywhere. I recently searched and I couldn't. I could only find the excerpts of the exact guidelines quoted on different trad blogs. Talking about,
they're trying to keep it alive.
I know, it's like, it's here, really, it's still there. And I was like, I appreciated, when I first read them, I didn't, I was, just kind of new to it. And I was like, oh, well, that's like, they sounded reasonable. I mean, they pretty much are. But it was like, I didn't understand because of the way it was presented to me. And I wasn't even in trad bubble at the time. That was before, but it was like, they're not binding under sin. They're not magisterial. They're not ever, part of a catechism or a moral guidebook. Like, never has the church published them with her official capacity, like as something to surely go by. But you're not really told that. So you're like, like the skirts and masks, you're like, oh my gosh, I thought this was like longer than it is. I'm like, oh, and you're just like dying.
You are.
Like, oh my gosh, I'm a Scarlet Woman and I can never wear this thing again. I feel terrible. I can't wait to get home. And it's like,
Yeah, so much stress. I lived in a constant state of, just anxiety about it. And, yeah.
You could see how that would really cause someone to go nutso if they ever walked away from that. Like they had enough and they were just like, I can't, I don't even, oh no, it's like, wow, oh my gosh, wow. A church is supposed to be like this peaceful haven, but actually it's more of a center of your scruples, like coming out and
so many scruples, because I was responsible. They had short stories that they would share about women who had caused men to sin and even to go to hell, which is very interesting to me because the church has never condemned anyone to hell. Like even, Martin Luther or, some of the Hitler, they won't even condemn them to hell. Like nobody is condemned to hell, but yet in the society, they're condemning people left and right,
right.
And it was because of me. And my personality, I really took that on hardcore, because I was like, that's worse than killing someone. Sending someone to eternal damnation, all eternity, they can't get out of that. Like that is literally worse than death. And I have the power within my body to send someone to eternal damnation. Now try to carry that on your shoulders from the age of 6. It was terrifying.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. Whoa. Especially since they would quote constantly Fatima, like souls are falling into hell like snowflakes. If you live here in Montana and you get to see the snowfall, you get to contemplate this a lot. Souls are falling into hell like snowflakes from sins of impurity. In order for people to fall into hell like snowflakes, like, yes, it has to be from smelling her perfume. We didn't even have a mirror. Guys, my worst fear was this would happen to us girls. We would get our skirts tucked up in our leggings or our pantyhose. We didn't have a mirror to check ourselves in the bathroom because that would be vain. They didn't want you like looking at yourself. And so sometimes we'd have to like help each other like untuck our skirts because we didn't know.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. So I mean, I feel like devotion to Our Lady has made this big emphasis in trad circles. Like, you pray the rosary, you talk about her all the time. She's everywhere. Like, and that's, at least on the face of it, that's super good because Our Lady is extremely important. But then there's like, I was actually talking to my mom the other day and she's like, isn't it interesting? Like woman is, she's the image, like Our Lady is the image of the perfect woman, and we're all made in that image kind of, okay, we're made in God's image. I'm not trying to say anything crazy, but she's like, woman is significant because, as some, Catholic apologists have said, woman is the crown of creation. She wasn't an afterthought. She came after Adam. Like God's building up all these amazing things. He makes man and then he makes woman and then he makes the perfect woman. And it's like, wow, I get to be a woman too. Like that should be something that like in the Middle Ages naturally flowed over into chivalry and all this, care and reverence for women because of how special they were. Not like, oh, woman is the weaker sex, so we're just going to be like easy on her. It was like really this profound respect and reverence. And I think that people want to believe that that's still alive in trad circles, and I'm sure it is. I've seen it in some individuals, but overall, the more people I talk to from all over the place, like I hear from people all over the world, and things that I'm hearing, they're all kind of relating to this. Like, no, that doesn't. It kind of stops. It's like Our Lady, and then it's just like, oh, and everybody else, and all you women down there, make sure you're doing your job, and like you're kind of low man on the totem pole. You're not really important except in a certain capacity, and you're basically a problem.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like 100%. What's really sad about that is I had a really good guy friend at the SSPX, and he would tell me all the time, like, I feel sorry for you women. You have it so tough. Like he would tell me that all the time. He was the sweetest soul, and honestly, he was a total light to that parish. 100%, like one of my favorite people there. And he would say, I feel so sorry for you. Like you can't just like walk into the store and get an outfit. He goes, for me, like my style, like we're never picked on, we're never told, like we just, but for you it's got to be so hard. And he would acknowledge that. And that was just something that I always really appreciated because, we had this crazy high standard of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Like she was the standard, yet we didn't get any of that like love or reverence for being a woman. Obviously Mary's gonna have more reverence because she was the mother of God, but like you said, that reverence of just being a woman did not carry over. Actually, we had like this, look at how she was dressed. You should be dressed like the mother of God. But it was really interesting to me, like looking back on it, I'm like, Jesus wore a dress and Mary wore a dress, but if they'd been born in today's time, Jesus would have worn pants, and I very much imagine Mary probably would have worn pants as well, since she dressed just exactly like her culture. That wasn't the point, but they made that the point. Look at her wearing a dress. I'm like, she really didn't have a choice. The men didn't even have a choice back then between a dress and not. So if Mary had been different than her culture, she would have been going against her culture, but Mary wasn't. She fit in her culture. If she'd been radically going against it the way that trads do, she probably would have worn pants. That would have been going, against her culture.
That's kind of a shocking thought.
Exactly.
Because who would ever think about Our Lady as someone who would just be like spotlight on her everywhere she went, like, wow, she's so different. Wow, look at her. She's just like standing out for everybody. It's like, no, it's like totally the opposite. She's like so quiet and humble, she barely even makes it into scripture. No. I mean, I think she wanted it that way because she was still humble, but it's like, wow, right. At some point, it's like, it almost becomes weird.
Yeah. No, it really did. I did not. I remember being told, like, one day on Judgment Day, we got that thrown at us a lot. On Judgment Day, we were always thinking about our Judgment Day. One day on Judgment Day, like, Mary she's going to be so proud of you for always wearing a skirt. And honestly, so sad. Nobody ever got a hold of my heart. Like, it was never about the heart. It was always about the externals. About the externals. I would be judged on my externals. Like, she would see that I always wore a dress, and she's going to make sure I get a reward for that. It's this punishment reward system, like, I'm going to hell if I don't, but if I do, I'm going to get a golden crown and we'll probably get a higher place in heaven. So I was taught that there were higher places in heaven and lower places in heaven. And I probably wasn't even going to make it into heaven, but if I did, I was for sure going to get a lower place. But, maybe at least I'd get a couple jewels.
Wow,
if I wore a skirt all the time.
It almost sounds Mormon. Like, if you're married a good Mormon man, whatever, and then you get to be part of his planet when he's dead. It's really very interesting.
Very, very, very much. Okay. There was definitely like, you'll get a higher place in heaven. It was even for stupid things like, I'd stub my toe and be like, well, Beth, offer it up and maybe you'll get a higher place in heaven, or I'm like, oh, I don't really want to. Offer it up, suck it up, and you'll get a higher place in heaven. It just became like this whole idea.
Interesting, Yeah, it's not about relationship. It's like scores and grades. Well, and again, okay. So I didn't finish because I forgot. I got off track.
No, you're good.
What my mom was saying about Our Lady crushes the head of the serpent. Okay, and it's like, so the devil always goes after her. He's always got this thing for her, and so it's like, consequently, all womankind, he's gonna go after. We see this, it's easy to see it with the Freemasons and like taking, trying to corrupt women's fashions or whatever, like, but because they specifically said, in their secret manuals or whatever, like, you take down the woman, you take down the culture, because she's the one that raises the bar, she's the pinnacle. And so it's like, okay, well, if you're not building women up, you're tearing women down. So which one of these is it? And isn't that interesting that it's manifesting like that in something that claims to be so good and have all the externals in place? It's like your externals, but your heart isn't in it. And people are suffering. Like, they come out psychologically damaged because of that. And then they're not encouraged ever to get, like, you don't go get help, right? You don't
No, we never. So, psychology was an evil invention. Anything that had to do with like therapy, absolutely not. You could not go get help. You had to go and talk to your priest and ask your priest, which was really, really hard. We didn't have, especially as a young woman, you could kind of try, but you couldn't really have that kind of relationship with the priest like the men could. And so you were kind of on your own. You were left with, your mom, and she got her standard from, whatever else the women in the parish were doing and dressing, and it all had to be and look the same, like almost like we were Amish or something.
Wow. So yeah, if you're having a struggle or something, it's like strictly spiritual, and you just have to suck it up and deal with it. Were you encouraged to like like go to, each other to help work things out, or like if you tried to bring things up with your friends, like struggles you were having or something, was that welcome, or was it kind of like, oh, you're showing weakness, like let's kind of just keep this quiet and like
you're showing weakness. Nobody talked about emotions. No. And I don't know if that was just the culture in our parish or if that extended to other SSPX parishes. I'm not sure. Like I said, I grew up here my whole life and I attended the same parish. We did go up to the main parish where our priest came from in Idaho. But that was, I was up there for confirmation and stuff, but I didn't get to like experience the culture. But that definitely was the case here. Emotions were.
Hallie she says, what about healing ministries, or was that a thing?
There weren't any healing ministries. No, there weren't any ministries at all.
Well,
no.
So you're just on your own.
You were just on your own. We didn't have anything within the church. I mean, the only ministries you could be a part of was cleaning the chapel. Yep. So we all got to clean the chapel. And I guess maybe the being in the choir, the serving at the altar were two things you could do. But no, there were no groups. There were no support groups. There were no Bible studies. Mm-hmm. There were no groups for women that you could be a part of. The guys would do, some get-togethers and things. And they got to do a little bit more of the educational stuff. Women definitely didn't get to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. So yeah. No, our parish did not offer anything like that.
It kind of sucks to be the remnant, huh?
Oh gosh.
Oh man.
But I didn't know what I was missing. Yeah. I didn't know. It was all I knew. And I what was preached at us a lot was you're fitting through the eye of the needle, and I was just like, oh God, I remember like praying, thank you so much that like I made it through the little tiny needle. That was something that really bothered me. That was, you asked me what was really one thing that was hard for me in the SSPX. I would say the hardest thing for me was I love people. I mean, I love people, all people. And when I was little, I did not discriminate. That was something that I was definitely taught. But I remember walking into Costco or just any store in town, and I just see someone and be like, my heart would break every time. Oh, she's in pants. Like she's going to go to hell. I'm not going to get to be with her for all eternity. My grandparents or anybody who was outside of this little church, which was literally everybody in my family, except for my immediate family, my parents and my siblings, all of my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, everybody that I loved and cared about, they weren't going to make it in. There was just pretty much no way. We'd be lucky that we made it in. Mm-hmm. And so they definitely weren't. And I think my heart broke a little bit every day. And it really undermined my view of God and mercy. I didn't see mercy as something that was extended to everyone. Mercy was only extended to people who were working their butts off in the SSPX, and you were going to confession, you were doing all the things, you were checking the list. Mm-hmm. And then God would extend his mercy because you had done everything right and you still needed that mercy because you are a sinful, horrible being. I would actually question myself, why did God make us? We're so awful. Like, why, Yeah. And then they'd say, oh, well, God regretted, humanity, and that's why we were destroyed in the flood and probably will be again,
Oh, wow, I feel even better about myself than I did. Oh man.
I was just, that was probably the hardest thing for me in the society was I just seeing people and being like, oh, they didn't make it. Why did I make it? Why me, God? Why did I make it into this little remnant, but nobody else? Why would you make so many people if you know they're all just going to go into hell? Right. Like, that's cruel.
Could you pray for your family and others to be saved? This sounds so sad and hopeless.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm kind of like raw and real.
It's genuine.
But yes, we absolutely could. I mean, we're encouraged. We couldn't pray for them during Mass because that was only for people who were like in the society. I remember actually, I felt really naughty about it. My step grandpa who had passed away, he was Catholic, just Novus Ordo Catholic is what we called it, regular Catholic. It's ridiculous that I have to make those distinctions, but I do. And I used to like try to get away with like praying for him because I was just like, I mean, I know he doesn't count as Catholic because we were taught that Catholics, like Novus Ordos, they don't count as Catholic, but I would still try to, because I wasn't really supposed to pray for them during Mass, but I could pray for anybody privately in my home. So yeah, we prayed for the conversion of everybody, you know, all the time. Offer up lots of rosaries, you know, sacrifice, rosaries on your knees, much better. Much better.
Right. I talked to a guy who had been a sedevacantist for over 40 years. And
seriously?
Yeah. And he was talking about that huge pressure. Like his group was very cultish, very joyless, but they were just like, I mean, they all kind of are, but that one sounded really bad. But he's like, just the burden of always being said, like, the world depends on your prayers and sacrifices. Basically, it's like, you have got to save as many sinners as you can. You've got to suffer as much as you can. You know, if you have joy or something happy that happens to you, like, look out, because you better go make up for that somehow, because that's
the other shoe is going to drop. I still wait. I still cringe. Anytime any good thing happens to me, I wait for the other shoe to drop. Or I wonder if God loves me because I am having a good life. Like, we were taught to question that, because they would say all the time, like, those who suffer greatly are the ones that God loves. But you know what? There's so much truth wrapped up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what made this so dangerous, because there's so much truth wrapped up, but the way that they twist it and present it for their agenda to keep you. I mean, if you think about why the society exists, it literally exists because of an evil. There's an evil somewhere else, like, not because it's good or beautiful or true on its own, but because of this great evil over here, you know? And so it really is just, it's twisted, but because there's some truth in it, you know, it makes you think that you're the problem. It makes you think that it's you and that, you know, you're crazy.
So I guess you kind of were getting into this already. I don't know if you have any more to say about, like, what was the prevailing attitude about Catholics, like Novus Ordo Catholics, and then non-Catholics. You know, were you supposed to kind of avoid those people so you didn't get infected by their error? Or were they just kind of like, well, we hope for the best, but we're just going to live our little life over here, and, like, you know, we don't associate with, like, could you pray with them under any circumstances or things like that?
No. So again, I can't speak for the whole, but for what we got, what was preached to us, and especially like within my family and within the actual parish, to be Catholic was way worse than to be Protestant. I felt so sorry for the Novus Ordo Catholics, because I was told all the time, they know better. They know better. And so, but they're choosing to be liberal. They're choosing to be rebellious. They're choosing to be in error. And so that was honestly worse. It was worse. We did not associate. We did not have any friends, very few, and the time was like extremely limited. My mom made sure that, or my parents, that I didn't view them as Catholic. I didn't view them as the same as me. Like, no, they are Protestant, but even worse, because they're going to be culpable, you know.
Whoa. So when you're interacting with those Novus Ordo Catholics, are you supposed to politely sort of go along with their narrative that they're Catholic? Or did you ever, like, say to any of those people that you interacted with, like, you know, you're not actually Catholic?
Definitely. We were supposed to be little warriors, you know, and I was like, how can you, this is what I was doing. How can you hold Jesus in your hand, your dirty hand? How could you do that? Like, think about it. Like, he's the Son of God. Like, and I totally shamed them. Like, looking back, it was just like, how could you, your priest is facing, you know, he's facing the people. He's not facing God. Like, he only cares about himself. Like, so much judgment. We made so many judgments. So, I mean, if we ever did have a conversation, it was definitely like, how could you abuse? So much abuse is going on. You know
You're just standing there slack-jawed.
They're just like,
what? Never even.
Okay.
Oh man, no.
You know?
Whoa.
Yeah.
So your family, a lot of your extended family is Protestant still. And so you guys just had to really like, you couldn't get together and pray with them or do things like that. Like when they had their family reunions and their, prayer services, because they're very devout.
Yes.
Protestant.
Yep. Okay. I have a lot of pastors, uncles who are pastors and very devout, love God, and they'll read their Bibles. But we weren't a part of any of that because yeah.
Oh. Wow.
Nope.
So how was the Pope regarded or talked about?
Oh gosh. So for me, again, this is what I understood, what I was getting. We had this category of like the most evil people in the world, which I mentioned would be like Hitler or Stalin, or that's where the popes went. They definitely went in that category. They were compared many times to Hitler and Stalin, and the most evil, corrupt people. And I remember pictures. I was actually terrified of them because I remember that there were pictures on videos and things, and they would have like red eyes and devil horns, and especially John Paul II, JP2. He was one that I was particularly terrified of, and
wow,
Pope Paul VI. So yeah, I didn't understand. To me, they were just evil men who had taken over the church and corrupted it and allowed all these beautiful churches to have these modernists come in and take over and just pushed all of the real Catholics out. And it was the catacombs time. That's what they tell us all the time. Like, oh, it's the time of the underground church of, like this has happened to the church before and again, but it was all led and head up by the Pope. So yeah, our view of the Pope was, we actually had a picture. This was another thing that was really confusing and hard for me. It's like, he's bad, he's evil. But then we do have his picture hanging up in the back of the church. And yeah, that I remember my friend too, he was really bothered by that because he was like, it's kind of bothers me that he's such a bad man, but yet we allow his picture to be up here. I mean, that was definitely the attitude.
Wow. Yeah. So again, just totally for externals, because in order to not be considered in a schism, you got to show that you're still connected to the Pope, that you acknowledge him, even though you basically have no use for him and you think he's dirt.
Absolutely no use. Absolutely no use, except to bash him. Like he was never spoken positively. I cannot remember one positive thing spoken about a Pope after Pope Pius XII.
Oh. Wow.
Not one positive thing.
Darn. Well,
yep.
There's just no room for, wow.
Yep.
Holy cow. So did you know anything about your local bishop or?
No, I didn't know. I didn't know his name. I didn't know he even existed. I didn't even know how a diocese worked.
Oh, so the only bishops in the world basically were the 4 SSPX.
4 bishops. Okay. Those were the only ones. And because there's no diocese, I didn't know what a diocese was. I didn't know about a local bishop. We certainly never prayed for the one. We never talked about the diocese. Like I said, I didn't even know what a diocese was. So yeah, we had 4 popes, and I knew that I was confirmed by De Galarreta. But that was all I knew about them. Okay. And I knew that my family was obsessed with Bishop Williamson, and that he eventually got booted.
The boot. So you didn't feel plugged into the wider church in any way at all. Like that was to be strictly avoided.
Nope, absolutely not. Because if you at all, like that was contamination. That was contamination of the worst kind. The worst kind.
Man.
So yeah, there was no. I mean, I'm laughing about this. I honestly don't know why, because it's tragic it's sad, and we'll definitely get more into that. But yeah, if you don't laugh, you'll cry. And I've definitely spent a lot of time. It's ridiculous, honestly.
Yeah. It's so weird to me too how this idea developed that your faith is so fragile and your doctrine is so permeable or whatever, or like that you have to protect it so carefully and so fearfully. And that is such an idea promoted in the society. Like they're always telling people, read this, don't read that, don't go to this website, don't watch these things. It's like, I think that's so interesting. It's like, holy cow, because we aren't strong enough. You can't count on any of that. You just got to stay over in the corner and protect yourself, because you could lose your faith. You could be contaminated. You could become a modernist. It's like, holy cow.
Slippery slope.
How did Christianity ever change the world, ever catch that fire? Because if the apostles had been like that, no, it never would have gone anywhere.
No. We weren't hiding. I mean, they were like, it is such a slippery slope. It could take one little thing. It could literally take nail polish. It could take earrings. It could take especially for women, if you get a job outside the home, that was always something that like we would watch. Some of the girls would get careers or get a job, and my parents were like, no, my girl is not going to get a job, because that is such a slippery slope. We don't want you to touch the world. We don't want you to be in the world. You need to stay in this perfect little bubble, because it's going to be so easy to just slip into hell. Whoa. Just so easy. Wow. Slippery slope. That was the number one thing that I was told.
Scary fear. Like, keep you right where you are. Don't look around. Don't talk to people, because it's not like questions. It's not about what you can offer to other people, like in a positive way, or like winning people for Christ. It's like, I've heard it put that trad evangelization is hide out and lash out. That's their version. It's like they just hunker, but if they have an opportunity to like talk to somebody about it, they're like, you're going to hell if you do this. And did you know you're going to go to hell if you do that, or if you don't do this? And it's like, it's very accusatory. It's very like panicky.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Holy cow, who is going to come in like that? I mean, like, it's amazing anybody does come in because of that. I mean, there are some people that are kind of like, whoa, well, what do you have that I don't have? And then they look in, and then they stay, but it's like very few people.
Yeah. We didn't have any like converts. The entire 15 years that I was there, we had one or two converts. They were older. Never a young person that converted. That we would only occasionally get another SSPX family who moved here that would start attending the parish. But otherwise, there was never anyone new, and we never did any evangelization at all.
So when they talk about their growth in numbers, mostly what they're talking about is people just having a lot of kids, and then them getting baptized is growing the number of Catholics. But then so many of those leave the faith when they grow up.
Yes, there were definitely way more. I can think about like 5 or 6 off the top of my head who left. So if you think about who actually came in and then who actually left, and there's actually been more since I did, and I'm not even counting myself. So just here at our church, if you talk about who's left and who came in, like not even comparable. But I think the most heartbreaking thing is most of the people that left let go of the faith completely, which I almost did. Because if this is Catholicism, and when I was at a point where I was like, okay, I know I can't attend here. This is so bad. I know this is the truth, and this is not the truth, and this isn't founded on anything. And then, but I can't go to big, scary Rome that's literally the Antichrist, that's evil. Okay, Christianity must just be a horrible, evil thing, and either that, or you're just like, I can't even care. I'm so burnt. I'm so broken. I can't even care. God doesn't even care about me anyway. And so they they go into survival mode, and they completely let go of any faith at all, just go agnostic.
Wow. Well, because you've been spoiled on everything else. There's nowhere else to go, because that was the remnant. It was the only stronghold left. And so then it's like, if you can't handle it anymore and you got to bail, there's nowhere for you to go.
Yeah. Okay. You break, and you are high and dry, high and dry.
Wow. So when you notice people coming in to the church or to the society from like the Novus Ordo especially, or wherever, like, did you notice changes in them over time, like for positive or negative changes?
So I can think of a couple off the top of my head, and
the two that came in while you were there.
The two, and I loved them. I loved them so much because they brought, I didn't know what it is, but I'm looking back, I know what it is now. Charity. Of all the virtues, that was not one that we focused in on. We definitely focused in on humility and penance. but charity not so much. But charity, love. They had love, and it was like this breath of fresh air, and we were all obsessed with it. And looking back, I was just like, whoa, was it? I didn't know what it was, but now I know that's what it was that they had. And that little light, that glimmer slowly started to go out. I honestly can't even recognize those people anymore because they sound and look exactly like everybody else who's there. And so I think watching that was a real wake-up call for sure.
Wow. It's like you were all freezing and somebody brought a little fire into the room.
Yeah,
and you're like, oh, I love it.
I love it.
And then
what is this?
Oh, man. Then it just went out and everybody was cold.
Yeah.
That's awful.
Yeah, because our culture was bashing. That is the culture. You have to bash everything. We would even make fun of each other and laugh at each other. That was the kind of the way that we interacted, was to, make jabs and digs. And then when you would talk about any issues outside of, like church issues or anything, it was just bashing, negative. Like, so evil, so bad. Like,
ain't that a shame game, as I've heard it called.
Yep.
That's definitely
ain't that a shame game.
Definitely a trend I've noticed hanging out with trads. It's like it always devolves into that. If you try to be like, hey, I'm reading this great spiritual book about this or that, like, or kind of like elevate it, people just kind of like uncomfortable, and they don't really know what to say.
It gets really awkward. It gets really awkward really quick, but if you get into like, did you see what so and so did, or I was out and this mom walked by me and she had only one child, and she was wearing shorts, and think about how many people she sent to hell, and think of how many people stumbled because of her. Wow. Don't be like her.
Yeah, it's like it starts this feeding frenzy. Yeah. I've even noticed it in the comments on my YouTube videos. Yeah. If one negative person gets in there and they just start like, it's like all these people jump in there and they all just do the same thing. And I'm like, whoa, what is up with this?
And the problem is when you can't love people while you're judging them. So because we were judging that woman in the pair of pants, because we were judging, I never was able to love them. I was never able to see their soul. I couldn't see their soul because I was so busy looking at the externals and worrying about her. And for sure, I knew her soul was in a bad state because she was in a pair of pants. I couldn't even love her. I became such a judgmental person. Just judging. You have to, because that's the only way you preserve why you're doing what you're doing, because you don't have a valid argument, because you can't find anywhere that why the church tells you have to wear a dress. You literally can't find it. So because of that, there has to be a reason why you are, and the only way to keep that alive is to judge everybody else for why they're not. And so you're so busy judging, you can't love. There's no room for it. There's literally no room for it.
Right. Yeah, I remember that too, from being super sensitive about things like the modest dress and seeing women around me who weren't wearing enough, or whatever I judged wasn't enough. And I would just be, I was so offended. I was so anxious. I was just like, and I thought I was so virtuous because I was all sensitive about it. Like, it means that I have a really well-formed conscience and I'm just so I'm just so on the right road. But it was like, I was so full of this interior anguish for these people and this anxiety that it's like, you're right. It crowds everything else out.
Literally, you can't. You're just like, oh my gosh, how could she must feel horrible. Like, when does she see the way that people are looking at her, the way people are staring at her? And like, honestly, it's I remember this comment once that it was like, guys, the Islamic girls are putting us to shame. And I'm like,
what a thing.
Okay, so if they're putting us to shame, that means we probably should try to one up them. So how do we go about one upping Islam?
Well,
because the truth is, when you go down that path, it's true. If we're so bad and so sexual that we literally need to like block our eyes out, because the truth is, it is about the heart. So Islam is right. You can flirt with your eyes. You can flirt with anything. Gosh, I actually could probably flirt without my eyes. Let's get real, okay? No. Laura could. Just her voice, okay? Laura's voice, enchanting.
Oh yeah.
So we would just, you wouldn't get to talk. Like no talking for Laura.
I'd be made a mute. No.
You'd be made a mute. Here's the thing, guys. It never ends. That's the catch. It never ends. You can never be holy enough. You can never be covered enough. You always need higher. And so it's just, oh my gosh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's interesting how they take certain things from scripture, like the thing about people are so bad that God sent the flood to wipe them all out, and because he regretted making man. It's just like, okay, well, that was in a context, that whole story. Okay, all right. Context. He doesn't just keep saying that every chance he gets throughout scripture. He says some amazing things, or like the prophet Hosea, and God tells him to go marry a prostitute, and she leaves him over and over, and he keeps taking her back. Because he's like, this is how I love my people, because you are so precious to me. Like, that's why I did that.
Never quoted. No.
It's like, I mean, that kind of stuff is all over. It's like, you're beloved, and that, wow. Okay. Well, leaving that out, I'm sorry, that's not it's unpardonable. There's just no good reason why you would not also make that an emphasis. It's like, if he's a God of love and he does, he died out of love for us, it's like, is that the only time you get to use the word love in traditional context,
really? I didn't really get to hear that he died out of love for us a lot. It was, he died because to open the gates of heaven, because I was a sinful creature. Like, he died so to reopen the gates of heaven. I was taught the whole catechism. He died and he carried my sins. And I mean, that's like I said, it's absolutely true. Yeah. I am a sinner, and God absolutely died for me, but he died because of love. But that's just, there's no emphasis on that. I'm sure it's there. And like you said, there's, and I actually mentioned this to Laura when we were chatting. We had a priest who was amazing. He was actually the one that gave me my first Holy Communion. And he had a lot of love, and he gave a lot of love. And so I'm not saying that there is none of that. Like, there are beautiful people, 100%. And that's one of the heartbreaking things about it for me, is like, they're all like really good and beautiful people and amazing priests. And so you're going to get a little bit something different focus. But I would say in general, the general focus over the 15 years that I was there, it was very clear. It was very, very, very clear. And it was definitely not on love.
Whoa. Well, and that's what's sad too, is those wonderful people that are really trying so hard, and they want to do the right thing, and they manage to hang on to some charity, and like, they're stuck in that. Then they don't see themselves as being captive in that mentality, and they're missing out on all this other fullness that the society is not dishing out on a regular basis of Catholic doctrine and spirituality. And
no, you're pretty much gonna get the same thing on your tray every time you go through.
So was it hard for you to make friends at church, or easy?
Yes, absolutely. So, and again, like I said, we were a very small parish. I pretty much grew up, we were more like a family would function. So there wasn't really this friends, but it was kind of the worst of both worlds, because you're not family. But at the same time, you're all you have. That's what happens when you're in like the survival mentality, and you are the remnant. You're all each other has. And so you can't really, it was really brutal, because if you weren't accepted into the different little cliques that they would make, I mean, once you were out, you were out. I can't speak for what it would have been like had I been accepted. I never was. My parents were a little bit troublemakers, as you can see how it turned out. And because of that, we were always held a little bit at arm's length. And I happened to be born when everyone else had a boy. And so because I couldn't go with the boys when I was real little, we would play together. But as soon as we turned about 8 or 9, we kind of went into that more like separation. So I was kind of in a bit of a lonely spot for a while. So no, because there weren't any groups and we didn't really do anything together, I was just kind of on the out. I eventually did join the choir and I played the organ. And, you know, I was accepted for that, but we weren't ever like friends. Like we didn't hang out outside of church.
That just blows my mind, because it's like you already are rural. You have such a small community, and you have, you know, like maybe not somebody exactly your age, but it's like there were a lot of other girls there. And it's just like, and you're so personable. Like, I mean, we made friends right away, and I was a heretic Novus Ordo Catholic when we met. So, okay. So it's I mean, how did that not happen? That's what just has always kind of puzzled me. But it's like, again, you guys were always viewed as being kind of different.
We a little bit, and I was definitely not so our culture, and it was, again, here at this parish, it was very much like the girls hunted and they wore camo jackets. And honestly, I think that's awesome and that's great, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that wasn't me. I was definitely more okay, the color pink was not acceptable. This was a weird thing here. No pink. It was not cool. Like you had to be like black or gray or blue. I really liked pink, and that was kind of problematic. And so I think that kind of maybe I had a little bit of a rebellious streak in me too, because the style was to wear like a denim skirt with a black Under Armour jacket. Like that was the trend. And so I was like, because that's the trend, I'm wearing a floral skirt with a pink top. I was just like, I loved like Louisa May Alcott. I was super into, because we lived like we were 100 years ago. I lived like I was 100 years ago, and loved all of, you know, and you know what, classic literature, it's just great anyway. And it's amazing. So I definitely had a little bit of a rebellious streak there. So I was younger than they were, and like I said, all the boys were my age, so I was kind of in a tough spot. I know that wasn't everybody's experience.
But that's
Andrew had more, you know, closer friends too, but
right. Okay. So then I'm curious if you developed any particular interior struggles as a result of your like traditionalist formation. Obviously we talked a little bit about that already as far as like your womanhood and stuff, but were there other things, like more general kind of things?
Interior struggles. Well, I had problems with body image, body dysmorphia,
like just scrupulosity. That's
scrupulosity, really bad. Okay. Viewing my body as a negative thing. I developed OCD really bad OCD patterns in my brain, especially in the confessional, because I was so scrupulous about things that in order for my brain to calm down, I would have to confess the exact same things in the exact same order, the exact same number of times I did it, you know, whether they were mortal or venial. They were probably all mortal, so I'm just going to confess them as all mortal. Wow. And was never flagged. I didn't have any spiritual direction or like, hey, let's make sure that, you know, let's talk about this. No, they were totally okay with me going in and having my little OCD moment. And that went on for about 8 years. So those are things that I'm still dealing with on the other side. So that was what I came
That's like so weird to me that you would go in there confessing all these mortal sins, and like your priest knows your voice.
I was like 10 years old, and I'm committing like.
And he doesn't ever say, sins. "Honey, are you sure? Are you like ask a question? What was the circumstance of this? Like, are you really sure that you caused that person to sin or whatever?" It's like, wow, no. you just confessed to cover your bases, and they just accepted it and then treated you accordingly.
Totally accepted it. You know, I definitely started getting bigger penances, which sucked. So sorry. That was kind of that's the only word I can think of. It makes you really hate prayer, because I would, you know, when my list used to be small, I'd get like, you know, maybe a Hail Mary or this. But when I started having to confess my long list of mortal sins, I started getting like whole rosaries and stuff like that, and that was brutal.
Oh man.
You know, but I couldn't not, like, my brain, and I didn't even know what I had. I just assumed I was, evil. But I just, you know, I would confess all these big sins, and I confess more and more because I'm like, oh my gosh. So then I'd start to freak out, like, oh, this probably was, and that thought that popped in my mind probably was. And yeah, it was never flagged. No spiritual direction, anything like that. You know?
Wow. So you just continue in the state,
which I thought
more
that
and
was
more wiggy.
Yeah, I thought that was them, you know, like confirming to me, like, yes, you in fact have committed all these mortal sins. So wow. I was just like, gosh. So we kind of get a little bit worse and worse every time. My poor priest, once I came out of the society, they didn't know what to do with me in the confessional. They were just like, whoo, okay. Like they were so awesome, and they got me to the right places, and they got me help. And they helped me sort through it, and I've had a lot of healing. But it was amazing going from like that to like my very first confession when I was back in the church, like instantly flagged it, and they took care of me. It's just totally, and wow. That was with every priest here in the valley. So
wow,
it was amazing.
That's a switch.
Yeah, and I went through. Oh gosh, I probably went to confession to like 40 different priests in the SSPX, maybe even more. I don't know. Wow. A lot, you know, because we would have ones travel through, and, you know, I would go in different places, and we had different ones here.
Wow.
Wasn't flagged, but every single one here in the valley, like, you know,
right.
Instantly. That shows a big wow. difference to me.
That is really something. Man, that is rough. I hear that a lot about scrupulosity being very exaggerated and coming out. There's just years and years of trying to overcome that and develop like an actually well-formed conscience, because
my conscience was shot. My conscience was shot. I mean, I got to the point, I know, like, this is so ridiculous, but where you really thought, like, I remember I could not change a diaper. Couldn't change a diaper. I thought for sure it was a sin, like things like that. My little daily things. My conscience, I didn't realize, I thought my conscience was really sensitive and really good, and I was really holy.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, no, like every little thing.
Wow.
Is a sin.
We got a comment that says, I relate to her so hard on this. I got a few pointers on scrupulosity, but no real help or spiritual guidance from my SSPX priest for my years of spiritual struggle, even after directly asking for it.
Oh man. That's so tough. I feel you. I really, really feel you. Yeah, because it's out I'm there. So thankful for your platform. I love that people get to voice that and talk about that, because I just know some of the people that I've gotten to talk to, just hearing that, like, okay, yeah, I'm not crazy. This did actually happen to, you know, to other people. This is a shared experience, you know?
Yeah.
It was just so sad. I didn't realize you get so vulnerable in confession. You get so vulnerable in confession. And that's why it's so easy to develop these patterns within our brains, within our minds.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and that's totally taken advantage of.
Wow. This is an unrelated question, but we do have another one. Oh, wait, sorry. Here. He says, what was the source of magisterial authority in the SSPX? Bethany is awesome.
Aw, thank you so much. You're so sweet. What was the source of
magisterial authority?
It would have gone your priest, and then one of the 4 bishops. I don't even know who. Honestly, I didn't really question, because we didn't talk much about the bishops. But ultimately it was Archbishop Lefebvre.
Oh,
he was the ultimate authority. I remember, you know, to me, he was just like the holiest man that ever walked the earth. I was just like, why was he not Pope? Like, God, why would you do this to the church? Like, why was he not Pope? He would have led the church perfectly. Everything would have been amazing. So he was the ultimate authority. I mean, you had your priest, and you had the bishops, but Archbishop Lefebvre he was king.
Wow. All right. Yep. There's your magisterium. Not guaranteed by the Holy Spirit, but guaranteed by the SSPX. So you can go to bed and sleep peacefully at night. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Okay, so I'm curious what it was like for you attending your first Novus Ordo Mass.
Okay, so my first Novus Ordo Mass was Laura's wedding, which is really fun. And I wish so badly I could go back and attend that wedding now. But I was deep. Gosh, how old was I when you got married?
2016. 2016.
You got married in 2016?
Yeah.
Okay, so I would have been 16.
Okay.
At this point, I was still very much deep in the. I was deep in it. I was deep in it. I mean, the church, everything I'd ever been told about it, and I'd never gone and experienced it myself, of course. I never went and actually made sure and checked my facts. No, I just took it that it was, in fact, evil and corrupt and, was almost pretty much blasphemous to the Blessed Sacrament. And I mean, it's extreme. They use very extreme language. Don't try to let anyone talk you into that they're not that extreme or anything like, no. And like I said, maybe they've developed and changed a little bit, but when I was there, definitely not. So my first experience, gosh, you really see what you want to see, and that's the thing where it's hard to just like walk through the door. And I definitely wasn't like, oh, this isn't bad at all. I picked it apart. I mean, I picked it apart. I was like, the fact that they're saying it in English is dishonoring to God and wrong, it horrified me that everybody like received in the hand. Was it just a regular Novus Ordo?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like a Latin Novus Ordo because our priest wasn't really up on that at the time, but we had all the Latin chants and stuff. I mean, I walked into the introit and it was like,
I'm sure it was really beautiful. To me, though, it was completely foreign. I'm like, this might as well have been just your worst Protestant service you can imagine. I mean, me and my sisters, we were together and we just couldn't even believe it was church. Like, we were just... we were like, this is ridiculous. They are not honoring God.
You were so nice about it, though. I had no idea.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, in my brain. But again, that judgment, I sat in the judgment seat. That is what you were talking. You sit in the judgment seat and you judge it, and you judge those people, and you judge. I mean, I loved you so much, and I was just like, oh, Laura, she just doesn't know any better. She doesn't know any different. Oh my gosh, I didn't know any better. I didn't know any different. Like that, yeah. I'm sure I received some beautiful graces there, but my heart was definitely not there. It was stony heart.
That was a rough.
I resented the fact that I had to go to church either in a hotel lobby or a tiny little chapel. Not that you can have beautiful liturgy in a small place. That's not what I'm saying. But the fact that there were all these beautiful historical churches that were founded here, and they had all been taken over and stolen from us, and so I had a lot of resentment. I had resentment that I didn't get to just go to the Catholic Church in my diocese, which I didn't even know what that was,
That's so sad.
It is sad. It was heartbreaking. But yeah, my first experience was not good. It was rough. Gosh. Yeah.
So, okay. So my next question is, when people left the society, how were they treated? How did you feel about that? Like, what did you observe about people leaving and like people's attitude or the way they talked about them after they left or things like that?
It was pretty much a sentence. It was pretty much a sentence to hell, So it was like, oh my gosh, no. And it would give you a check. You would check yourself and be like, oh my gosh, I gotta make sure that doesn't happen to me. Everyone would crack down, especially if it was a young person that had left. All the parents would crack down harder on their kids. I definitely experienced this. We need to step it up a notch because, which the sad thing is the pressure just went up. And that's how we eventually, you just implode because they just turn the pressure up. They turn the pressure up because of the fear that you're going to eventually leave until you literally can't take it anymore. So when someone left, it was sad. We definitely talked bad about them. We definitely bashed them. The whole family was kind of shamed. Like the parents had failed. And there must have been some sin in their, kind of like Judaism. There must have been some sin. There must have been some kind of sin. And, you know, we all felt sorry. We felt really sorry for the families, you know, because that it was not only separation from them in this life, but it was separation from them in the next life. Yeah.
Wow. That's rough. There was like no hope basically then. Because
No.
when people left, they never came back, did they? Did you ever see anyone like leave and then come back?
No, people would kind of, there'd be some that would like flirt with the edges, but then they'd, you know, get it together and kind of reel it back in a little bit. But there was nobody that ever left and then came back.
Oh, okay. So obviously the treatment of them after they left did not give them any reason to ever want to come back.
Yes. I mean, my family is the exception to that. My family actually did leave and come back. That was brutal. That was really brutal. But we left, and like I said, there was nowhere to go because you can't go to conciliar evil Rome.
Yeah.
And so we were home aloners, you know. But eventually you start dying without the sacraments. And I don't think that word is too extreme, because if you've been Catholic and you're used to receiving the sacraments and then you don't, and you're still trying to live a Catholic life without the sacraments, like that is the life source. And we were cut off from the life source. And so I remember my mom, she was like, I don't care if I have to walk back into that church on my knees. I want to receive communion again. And like my mom's faith, like it has really kept me so strong, because even through all of that, even through everything she went through, like she truly had the love of the Eucharist. And so we had to, you know, metaphorically speaking, but like come back on our knees. And of course, nobody trusted us. We were never let in. We were never invited to anything. We weren't touched with a 10-foot pole. But we wanted our sacraments really bad. So we did. That didn't last very long though. That was kind of towards the end.
Okay. That's kind of like you're at the crisis point of like, is the society true? Is sedevacantism true? Is it like, so you're trying to like get this all together, and other sedevacantists end up home alone because that's like how they realize like, oh, there's nothing left. You can't even go to any group, whatever. You just have to stay home and be faithful. Yeah. So that's where you guys were kind of.
Yeah. My mom, for a little while, she attended the sedevacantist priest who would come through, and he would give mass at our little La Quinta here. And I still cannot stay at a La Quinta to this day.
Oh no.
Because I would literally bawl. I would cry every time I would go, because I'd walk in and I'd just be sitting there and be like, I felt abandoned. I felt like an orphan. I didn't feel like, and they would tell me, you're in the catacombs, like we're underground, but I didn't feel heroic. I didn't feel like I was doing something heroic for the church. I felt isolated. I felt alone. I felt without a family. And I couldn't believe that Christ had let his church down. You know? I just,
Right.
But then I try to tell myself, oh, it's because he loves you, and because if you suffer, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
It's in there, and it's in the chat. And while you answer it, I'm going to get my charging cord because I thought my battery was going to last longer.
Technology.
Okay, here it is. Thoughts on SSPX apologists?
SSPX apologists.
Ooh, yes.
I don't know. I would be so interested to know who. I've only listened to a couple, but I don't feel like they have a lot of apologists.
Like
Michael Davies.
Or, I mean, there's like Kennedy Hall, and I don't even know all the guys that are out there right now, but those are the two.
Okay. Yeah. You know, I probably haven't spent as much time listening to apologists. I've heard some of them on some of these different platforms, but thoughts on them, I guess to me, the arguments to me never really made sense. And that's how ultimately we ended up state of a contest, because the recognize and resist never really worked. And Andrew Bartel, I'm sure all of you guys are really familiar with him. He's got a lot of really great stuff on this. But the recognize and resist, it really, it doesn't work logically. So I don't know if that answers your question. I probably should spend some more time listening to apologists, but
SSPX apologists can be a little bit.
They're hard for me to listen to. I definitely say I'm just now getting to the point where I don't get triggered, because it's like, oh my gosh, I grew up with that lie.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean,
right?
And I feel like they're being dishonest. It feels like the way that they paint the society, it's a fish trap. Easy to swim into. They make it like this is what it is, super easy to swim into, almost impossible to get out of, super hard to get out of. They try to make it super hard to get out of. And so I guess I just, listening to apologists, sometimes I get really angry because I don't feel like they're being honest. I don't feel like they're being fully
right. Or they're honest. So deluded themselves by the talking points of the society and stuff that you're just like, oh man, like you haven't figured that one out yet. You haven't got through to the end. And here you are like trying to convince other people.
Yeah.
Because
Another problem that I had was their arguments are tearing something else down. We're this way because communion in the hand is so bad. We're this way because the Pope said this about gay marriage or this. We are this way because of the German bishops. We are this way, instead of being like, truth to me is like a lion. It defends itself. All you have to do is let it out of its cage. Okay. You just have to let it out of its cage. It defends itself. You don't have to go tear something apart for your argument. If you need to go tear something apart to make your point, then that's not truth. They should be able to just say, this is the truth, and it defends itself. You can look it up. You can absolutely prove that this is true. Like, that's what I found being Catholic. I don't need to defend the church. It defends itself because it is true. And so, I would say that's my biggest problem with my thoughts on SSPX apologists is, they have to tear stuff down to make a point.
I love that image that you shared about lion, like the lion being so, tenacious and strong. It's like truth has strength and vitality. It's not something that has to cower and shrink in fear to preserve itself, because it should be out there like C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia, and Aslan is Jesus, and it's like, wow, like so majestic, and he's so brave and amazing. Everybody's a little bit afraid of him, even if they love him, because he's so wonderful. Like, he's so good, but he's wild, and it's like the truth is wild, but it's like we don't have to be afraid. If we really have the truth, we shouldn't have to be afraid.
No, absolutely. I mean, it is wild. Anytime I try to explain transubstantiation to one of my friends, like, they absolutely look at me like I'm wild. They absolutely look at me like I'm crazy, but it stands. It stands. I don't need to tear anything down to prove transubstantiation. Like, it's the church has it all. They really do. You don't need to leave to find it somewhere else,
Right.
And ask questions. That was the thing about in the society. We weren't allowed to ask questions. As a Catholic now, I can challenge things. I can ask questions, and I'm totally free to do that. People can question me. I can question things. I can find the answer. We weren't allowed to do that, So that was...
that's
one of
sketchy.
The ways that they keep you there. You can't ask the tough questions. And if you do, you're instantly put in a certain camp. And that's what happened to my family. Because my parents, they didn't stop asking the questions.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mom and Dad.
Yeah. Where is that in church teaching that you should stop wondering or, asking? It's like, okay, no, I don't remember that.
Well,
so now we get to this. So what made you decide to leave the society ultimately?
What made me decide to leave the society ultimately? Okay, so it was a bit of a journey. At this point now, I'm coming of age. I'm 16, 17-ish, somewhere in there. My brother had left, and I'd fought a lot with him. But he was so happy, that little stinker. Like, he didn't turn out the way he was supposed to, the way someone was supposed to when they left the society, and their life is supposed to fall apart, and they're going down this terrible, terrible path. No, there was just like love coming from every orifice of his body. He was just so happy, and he introduced us to Laura and her family, and you guys were supposed to be these horrible liberals, but no, they showed me love. Love is transformational. Like, it really is transformational. And so getting that love, it started to change me. And I stopped really associating the Novus Ordo with this evil. It's like they couldn't hide it anymore, because I was starting to get exposed to it. And this is why the SSPX tries to keep exposure limited, because if you start getting exposure to the love and the charity and the freedom and the truth and the arguments, you start to open up your heart. You start to open up your heart. And he'd invited me to go to church, and my family at this time, they were also just like falling apart. We had gone with the resistance. My mom was like sedevacantist. My dad was still trying to stay in the SSPX. So it was literally tearing my family apart, not only religiously, but also in other ways as well. It crosses over, because our faith is so important to us. It crossed over to kind of every area in our family. And so I was watching all of the turmoil. I'm like, this can't be right. That the church that Jesus Christ founded isn't supposed to rip families apart like this. And so I started questioning some things. I attended another Novus Ordo, and it was really hard for me. I still felt scared, and I still felt like it was evil. I still had that narrative in my head so hard, but I made myself sit through it, and then, chatted a little bit with my brother after. I was talking to Laura. Laura is just like such a light. She was such a light, because she never judged me, and she loved me right where I was at. And that made a huge, huge impact on me, and started to kind of open my heart up. But a really big thing that happened as well is I met my now husband. But he at the time was home church. His family was Foursquare. And when I met him, he didn't know a lot about the church. He started to know more as we talked, but he was kind of basically started challenging me on some things, and he asked some questions that I couldn't answer, about like, why be Catholic? And, and I would try to explain, but it's really hard to explain that without papal infallibility and the magisterium of the church and the papacy. And so as I started realizing, and as he so kindly pointed out to me, you aren't really that Catholic. And I was like, he's like, I think we have more in common, because we both resist the Pope. We both don't want to have anything to do with him. And I realized, you know what? I don't think I'm actually really that Catholic, and with everything else that was going on at the time, like, it started making me question things. And he kind of pushed me, that I was like, gosh, I need to really dig deep and figure my faith out, because first of all, if he's going to convert, then I need to have these answers. And if there's not these answers, then I better leave, because I don't want to miss out on this hottie. No, you know what I mean?
She knew a good thing when she saw it.
No, I didn't want to let him go. So I was like, maybe I got to figure this out. So at the time, again, my family was kind of all over the place, kind of going here and there. So I was still kind of attending the SSPX. But then oh gosh, this was, we'd been together for a little while. I hadn't been to confession for a while, and I decided to go to confession. Pop in at Saturday night mass, and again, my heart was very open at this point. It was in a very raw place, and again, all of my OCD scruples, everything kicked in. And then when you're in a relationship, and sins of impurity were like the worst sins, anything with purity. And you got all these feelings, and you're attracted and everything. So I went in and started confessing all kinds of things, looking back on that. It was like, oh my gosh, that I thought were sins, and just extra things, and just kind of went into my whole thing that I did. And the priest didn't even really pay attention to any of the sins I confessed. He was just like, you need to break up with this guy. And I was like, oh, okay, like, why? I really love him, and like I think that he might be the man that I'm supposed to marry, And he was like, no, he's not. This priest was new, by the way. He'd only been instated for a couple of months. I didn't even really know him. And he was basically like, he's not Catholic. And I was like, well, I mean, aren't we supposed to, like, isn't this a good way to bring people to the church, is let them know about the faith? And he was like, nope, you have other things you need to do with your life. Your focus should not be there. You're way too young. I mean, I was 17, so, which is the weird thing about that, though, is the weird thing. There were lots of girls who were 17 that were dating other society boys, and that was totally fine. They were 16 even. So that was really strange to me, that I was like, well, we're not getting married. We're just dating. But he was just like, no. And he started talking to me in a really mean tone, and he started raising his voice, and that was very scary to me. Like, I literally went into a fight or flight response. And this has still never happened to me, but I started sweating. I broke a sweat. Okay. It is hard for me to break a sweat. Even if I go for a run, my body doesn't like to sweat, which is frustrating because I'm just like, I want to get all I'm talking about. Yeah. But I literally started shaking, and I broke into a sweat. I remember having to lean back. The confessional was this little dark box, and I had a coat on. I remember leaning back and taking my coat off and starting to like hyperventilate because I was terrified. I was petrified. I was in confession, and I didn't want to say I would break up with my boyfriend because I didn't want to, nor did I feel like it was the right thing to do. Like, I'd really felt at peace when I met him, and I felt like, things were good and we were having good conversations. But he wouldn't let me leave the confessional until I would say that I was going to break up with him, and he wouldn't give me absolution. And I was so terrified of not getting absolution. And so I was stuck. I didn't want to lie to the priest. He wasn't going to give me absolution. I was going to burst into tears, but I was just sweating. I was absolutely terrified, and his voice got meaner and meaner. And he just kept talking at me and saying some really horrible things. And I just froze, and I was just quiet, and I couldn't say anything. And he eventually just took my silence, I think, as agreement, and I wasn't going to leave. And I don't know, he finally decided to give me absolution, so he gave me absolution. And I remember opening that door, and I was just like shaking like never before. And I just went and sat in the pew, and I was like, I can never do that again. I don't care what happens to me at that point. Like, that was so bad. Yeah. Nothing could have been worse. That experience was so bad. I'm like, I will never go to confession again. I remember saying, I will never, ever be that vulnerable with a priest again. Confession is a horrible thing. Like, and for me, my boyfriend, he was like, I just have to go to God and confess my sins, And I was like, that sounds really good. That sounds really good. I wasn't getting any of the benefits of confession. And so, yeah, I was like, I can never do this again. And so I felt this like veil lift and this moment of clarity. And like those moments, I know this sounds like super woo-woo, but I could almost hear God be like, it's time to go, Beth. It's time to go. I'm not here. I'm not here. I'm not here for you. Like, I'm not saying that he's not there. Obviously, I know that they do have sacraments, valid sacraments at the SSPX. That's not what I'm saying. But it was like, this is not where you're going to find me, Beth. Like, you need to leave. And I felt perfectly at peace. I walked out that door and I knew I was never going back. And I never did. So my family had not left yet, but I was like, you know, I don't really know what to do. I still need to research and look into things on my own. So at that point, I started just looking into things in church history, and I started talking to my older brother, who is awesome. Started talking to Laura. Laura really took me under her wing. She also played a huge role in my husband. My husband ended up converting 3.5 years later. You're his godmom. So when he finally got baptized, because my husband, once I left the SSPX, he was like, oh, good, she's going to come Protestant, you know. But I was still in love with the Eucharist, and I was still in love with Mary. And even though all of those things, there'd been a lot of hurt and pain, I wasn't ready to let go of that. And I still, you know, believe there must be truth. So I started studying, researching, listening, and like I said, talking to other Catholics. And I finally decided that God had never, he had truly kept his word. The gates of hell had not prevailed against his church, that he had given the keys to Peter, and he had given him the authority to bind and loose.
Sorry, we're going to move over to the charging cord.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, guys. Oh, she's on a roll.
You're good.
That's our intermission music. There we go. Oh. There we go. All right. I'll go get my chair. All right.
Sounds good.
All right.
There we go. We got a little background change here. Yeah, so he had given him the authority to bind and loose, and that when he said the gates of hell would not prevail against his church, he meant it. Like, he meant it. And I could trust that. It was the most freeing thing. So I had a general confession, which was like so healing. It healed so much, just that one confession. It was a completely different experience. I'd never experienced confession. I'd never experienced reconciliation. I've never experienced that mercy and that love and that peace. And I was also given resources to get help for some of the bad things that I developed. And I knew I was home. Like, I knew I was home. And so not unfortunately for my husband, because he's so grateful for it now. But I just grew stronger and stronger in my faith. And we had conversations, and yeah, it took him 3.5 years. But he eventually came to the truth as well, through the Holy Spirit, and obviously through the grace of God. And he had lots of
from I'll never be Catholic.
Yes,
I have to be Catholic.
I have to be Catholic,
oh.
you know. And so he did, and you know, we got married, and yeah, it was
That's so
my
cool.
whole family ended up coming into the church, and yeah, it's been absolutely amazing.
So you were the second of the kids to leave the society, and then some of your sisters and your mom.
Yeah.
And then it's like just kind of
it was kind of a trickle. So yeah, my older brother left first, and then it was me, and then my mom and some of the kids, and then my dad. So yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's been a journey.
So how is being Catholic now different to when you were in the society? I mean, you've touched on a few things, but it's just like kind of a recap.
Completely different. I mean, first of all, like your worldview, just everything, how you view other people, how you live out your faith, so much of it is, it's there in your heart. Like, you're there because of your love, and there's so much love. You're not there because of fear. You're not there because you're afraid of going to hell. You're not there. The truth really does set you free. It really does set you free. And yeah, it's like getting to come home, be back part with your whole family that is all over the world. And you have a diocese, and you have bishops and priests and the Holy Father, of course. And I do not take any of that for granted at all.
Wow.
I'm so grateful. And I'm able to actually like focus in on, I don't have to do all that like work. There was just so much work of like, you have to be your own authority. You have to be your own pope. And that was really hard. Because you're constantly always trying to err on the safe side and, figure all of this stuff out. But instead I get to live in peace, to have a relationship with our Lord and with the saints. And I don't have to sit in the judgment seat, and I don't have to come up with all the answers.
Wow. That's a lot of. Did you notice anything distinctly different about priests that you met in the mainstream church or the laity that you interacted with that seemed different from the people you'd been around before?
They didn't judge me. That was huge. And love, honestly. I know I keep going back to that word and saying it over and over again, but I didn't experience that. I didn't experience that just charity and that love and that acceptance is like, you are ours, you are one with us. And that was all the difference. And the priests were always just so kind and always assuming the best and so realistic. I would confess something and they'd be like, oh my gosh, like that is just being human, and that's a beautiful thing, or like they got it, especially being married, or just they're real. They deal with like real issues, because these society priests are in this little bubble and they get the same kind of person, because it really is quite tiny, as much as they want you to like think that it's like this. No, not in comparison to the church. These priests are used to dealing with like stuff, because they actually deal with it. They don't just let people come in to the confessional and get out. You know what I mean? Like, so they're totally equipped, and thankfully they take psychology, so they, you know what I mean? That's a huge one.
Yeah, they have a little more in their back pocket.
Yeah, and they're also willing. That was another thing. They're willing to admit when they don't know. Society priests, not my experience anyway. They are not willing to admit that, like, oh, they don't have an answer for that, or they don't know, or that's not their expertise. Maybe you should get help over here, or this is this professional's job.
Okay.
Nope. They were all you had. That's all you had, was that priest. And so in the church, it's not like that. Priests recognize what their role is, but they also recognize that there are, other places that you can get help and other roles. And they just have that.
That's so cool.
That peace.
So when you left, what was that like for you? And I'm curious if anyone ever tried to dissuade you from leaving, or just ever plain out asked you, like, why would you do that, Bethany? Like, was there anything like that? Any kind of outreach at all from your previous community, which was so small and like close, basically?
It was. Nope. Nobody ever reached out. Nobody ever asked me why I left. My dearest friend, I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I only told my dearest friend, and he didn't really ask me why I was leaving. He more just was like, I understand, and I'm not surprised, because he'd seen what had been going on with our family, and he was like, it's going to be okay. Like, because he was just that awesome person. But nobody else, no one ever reached out to me or asked why I was leaving or anything like that. Wow. My parents, they got a phone call from the priest, but not me, because I was underage. Oh no. Yeah, and I didn't tell anyone. I just made a beeline out of there.
Wow. I have to say, it just seems so weird to me that people you grew up with who like knew your nature as this gentle person who's always trying to be good and like, that the no credit is given to you as, even a potentially trustworthy person to have some kind of legitimate reason for leaving, or that you're not worth making some effort to bring back. Like, oh, no, can't we just talk about this? Like, why don't you, what's going on? Like, can we help? Is there, if you have questions, let's talk about it. It's like, there's nothing, it's just total silence. And like, you're just cut loose to just drift. Well, in their mind, because then you're an apostate and you're just, it's like, is that just a self-preservation mentality that they have, or is it just really that lack of deep care for other people, do you think?
I think it's a little bit of both. It's really hard to form real, true connections when you're too busy judging each other. It doesn't foster an environment of real connection. So we realized we weren't ever really like truly, didn't really have this actual real bond. And so I think on one hand I wasn't worth it. And also they knew that if they left, like I said, you're cut off from your family. It is really bad. And so I remember there were a couple of people I really cared about that I reached out to after I'd made it out, but they would not talk to me. They would not talk about it. I had one conversation with my really good friend, but he was still just like, I just know it's wrong. I know that receiving communion in the hand is wrong. And so this doesn't even need to be a conversation because I know that it's wrong. And I sympathize with that so much because I was also there. I knew in my heart it was wrong. Yeah. But here's the thing. You can train your own conscience. You can convince yourself of something. And that's why the mind and the heart have to have a relationship with each other, and they need to stay in open communication. And, your heart checks in with your mind of, is this true or not? And then that is what is living in your mind starts to live in your heart. So you have to keep that relationship. If you just say, I know in my heart, I've known in my heart a lot of things that weren't true, and so you can't really argue with that though. When someone tells you that, they're just like, I know in my heart that the Novus Ordo is evil and wrong. And so that's kind of where the conversation stopped. It wasn't anymore.
That reminds me of what your husband said before he became Catholic about like going into a church building would make him physically sick.
Yeah,
like,
it would make him physically
he was just like,
ill.
I know this is wrong. Organized religion is evil and all this stuff. And he's just like, I know it is. Like, I can't stand it. And I'm totally like, but if he had just stopped there and only trusted that, he would never have made progress.
No. Wow. Yeah, because he did. Because if you have been growing up telling yourself this story, it's very important. The story that you tell yourself, it's super important. What are those stories that you tell yourself? Eventually you believe it, and you will even feel physical, from it. And so for him, he just believed so much that we were worshiping saints, and that we were doing all these evil things, that he would get literally sick if he walked by a church or walked into a Catholic church, which is like the opposite of me. Like, I walk into a Catholic church and I'm like, I feel Jesus. Like, he's so close. And that's kind of this whole idea of like where God is with all of us all the time, but it's how we perceive him, and how we feel him, and so for totally shifted now. I can't keep my husband out of the church now.
Yeah. He's like, come on, honey, let's go. You're like, okay.
Yes. I love converts. They have like this fervor, it always like shakes me up and like makes me alive again, because they're just like, I love it. He's definitely still, I mean, he's been Catholic for coming up on 4 years now, but he still has that.
That's awesome.
That fervor.
So cool. I think Hilaire Belloc, I read a quote by him about converts being the lifeblood of the church. Like they keep it vital.
I believe it.
And I'm like, that's so cool.
Yeah.
They don't take it for granted.
Yeah.
Yep. So any big takeaways from your experience or encouragement or advice that you would share looking back over everything?
Big takeaways. Oh, I guess my big takeaway would be, if you're living in fear, like afraid of things, that's definitely something that I wish I had, understood more. And then like, you're not supposed to live with that kind of fear in a Christian life. Just all of the negativity. You don't need to be so negative and so judgmental to live in the truth. We are not supposed to be divided from one another. I'm super, super passionate about that. There should be, I mean, if you think about what happened even within the Orthodox Church and the fact that we're still separated from them, like we are supposed to be one church. Am I adding to this separation? Am I the one that refuses to come back? Am I being the one that's like refusing to come back and, to have that humility and, to submit to that authority, if that authority is God-given? And like, how do you find that? I would definitely start there. Those are kind of my big takeaways. Healing takes time. I was under this illusion that I would walk out that door and I'd be done with that. I am done with that. No, you're kind of in shock for a little bit. First it's the shock and you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't, I made it out, and you're trying to deal with everything else. But then once you settle back into life, it's all still there. I mean, you need to work through that. And that's why I'm so grateful for Laura and for this channel that she has, because you might think you're able to just leave it behind. But that's not how humans work. Like we store those experiences, we store, whether it was trauma or whatever it is you went through, and that takes time to work through. And so I would just say, like, be patient with yourself. I'm still healing. There's still things that I deal with. There's still struggles that I have. There's still scruples that I come up. Gosh, so for years, whenever I would put on a pair of pants, like, because my conscience was so formed that was so wrong, I actually felt like I was doing something wrong. And I had to like go around feeling like I was doing something wrong. And that took me a while to retrain, to make a new pathway in my brain. Even if, and to focus more on my heart, modesty being something that is coming from within and not an external. My externals will only reflect like my internal, and even our externals really don't say that much about us at the end of the day. I mean, you think about that. So yeah, I would say be patient. Healing takes time. It takes time. And the reality is scars never go away. They just heal over. But the scars there are, they really do help us share experiences of being human. Like, we all have scars, they're just different, and they help us to relate to each other, and to be strong, so yeah, I would say that healing takes time.
That makes me think of our Lord's wounds and like why he retained them even in his glorified body. I mean, obviously his scars are, amazingly significant in so many ways, but it's like ours are meaningful too. And that all suffering is a participation in Christ's suffering. And it's like, your scars are actually beautiful, that he is going to do more good because of them than if you'd never had them.
Yeah.
Well.
Yep.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Bethany.
You're so welcome.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you for watching. It was great. And yes, no, this was really great. It was loaded. So hopefully I'll do my best. I'll get back there and I'll put timestamps in. And I can clip out little stuff so everybody can just get little tastes and not have to sit for 2 hours. But you really should just sit for 2 hours, because I mean, you could sit down and watch Milo and Otis or something and just like your brain drip out of your ears, or you could sit down and watch this and have all kinds of interesting things to think about.
Gosh, we'd be like, oh my gosh.
Milo and Otis are cute, but it's probably the most boring movie I've ever seen in my life.
You
so
know,
that's why it popped into my mind.
I know, it's true. I used to be like, how am I still watching this? But somehow I was entertained by a little cat and dog.
Yeah, it was mesmerizing.
It is kind of mesmerizing. You know, it is one of those ones that sticks in your brain. It's kind of bizarre.
Oh my god.
But yeah, please feel free to reach out. Obviously, you know, you can reach out to Laura, but can always reach out to me as well. And
yes, I can put you in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Laura can put us in touch, because I think that it's important. It's important to have people there,
right,
for you along.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a blessed second Sunday of Easter, and we will see you next time.
Thank you guys so much.